Imagine that, since you were little, you were aware that you were always very ugly. When you reach adolescence, you declare yourself to your crush, and the perfect girl at school filmed the scene so that you would be the target of more jokes besides your appearance. However, this was the trigger for her to decide to change, starting at school and then learning how to use cosmetics that will help her camouflage her skin's imperfections. The episode begins with the protagonist saying that she always knew that her beauty didn't exist, and everyone made a point of making that clear. When she was at school, things weren't easy. The girl was nicknamed Cupcake, and every time her classmates said the word, she ran to get some from the girls' canteen. Hyunbin is a boy who works in the school cafeteria, and the protagonist thinks he is cute. One day Hyunbin finds her listening to music while returning to the classroom with the cupcakes and takes the girl's phone. He is excited to know that she likes heavier music because that's his style too. Her classmates complain about Jukyung taking too long with the dumplings, and when they look out the window, they notice that the girl is talking to the boy from the cafeteria. Later, when lunch is being served, the protagonist works up the courage and invites Hyunbin to meet. As the boy ends up accepting, Jukyung begins to think that they can get involved. At night, the girl prepares shaped cookies for her lover, prepares a box with snacks and tickets for a show, along with a letter declaring herself to Hyunbin. The protagonist's father is having money problems. The man invested money he didn't have in a business that was flawed, and now other people he convinced to do the same are demanding it, but he hadn't told anyone. The next day, Jukyung takes his box with surprises to school, and when he ends up leaving the classroom, Saemi, the most beautiful girl in school, opens it to see what it is and is shocked to read the statement that the girl prepared. So Saemi goes to the cafeteria to talk to Hyunbin and says that she was very upset when she found out that he was dating Jukyung because he has such a pretty face and the girl is on a level far below him. Meanwhile, in the protagonist's mother's beauty salon, we see the men that the girl's father owes money to come to demand her mother, and at that moment, things start to go wrong in the eyes of some. Jukyung confesses to Hyunbin and gives her heart. The boy is a little mean in his response and tells her to be smart and think about whether he would date someone with her appearance. What they didn't expect was that Saemi would be filming everything, and Jukyung ran out of the place crying. When she is about to jump, she changes her mind, and a boy appears. He pulls her so she doesn't fall, and since she lost her glasses when she was pulled, Jukyung can't tell the face of the person she tried to help her. Then the boy gives her a lecture, asks if she doesn't think about her loved ones and how they would be after she leaves, and speaks as if he had recently lost someone. After helping Jukyung get down safely and get into a taxi, the protagonist tells him that whoever he lost, that person wouldn't want him to suffer for too long, so he has to cheer up. At home, Jukyung's mother is furious after finding out what her father did and that they now owe money. Her children try to hold her back, but the woman doesn't want to see him or paint him gold anymore and sends him away. The only one who ends up happy with the idea of returning to live in their old house and changing schools is the protagonist. The rest of the family is sad about having to return to a lower place than they were now. Jukyung faces this challenge as a chance to change everything, starting with her reputation and her appearance, so she buys makeup and watches videos on how to use it. However, when she shows up at school like this, she becomes a laughingstock again, as she has a little heavy blush and looks like a clown. But thankfully, she has a few days to learn how to take better care of herself before showing up at her new school. The protagonist learns how to pluck her eyebrows, take care of her face, and apply makeup products correctly. The protagonist's father moved with the family to their old house, and her first day starts better than she could have imagined. Everyone thinks she's cute. Suho is the one who is going to introduce her to the school. Jukyung thinks the boy is very handsome, and a small detail ends up happening while she is lost in her thoughts. The girl ends up hitting her face on the back of his uniform and leaving it stained with base. When Suho realizes that his clothes are stained, she gives them to the protagonist and asks her to fix them. Since it was the same clothes she got dirty, the boy is not at all friendly towards people at school. Ju-kyung makes friends on the first day who take her out to eat and have fun, something our protagonist wasn't used to, and the girl feels on cloud 9. Later, when she is at home, the protagonist's brother starts a war against her, as the boy takes photos of her face without makeup and glasses. He intends to show people these photos, or she can avoid this by buying a new edition of a comic she released and some food he likes to maintain his reputation, which Ju-kyung accepts. The protagonist goes to the comic book prince to get what she promised her youngest son. However, it turns out that it is the same comic that Soo-ho was waiting for, and the two fight over it. When Ju-kyung realizes that she is her school's hottie, she gives up what she owes her brother because she is afraid of being recognized. However, as the girl had just returned, the store owner surprised her and prepared some ramen for her, so she ended up getting a little more than she wanted. Ju-kyung realizes that the boy didn't recognize that she's from his school, so she starts to disguise herself and ask questions as if she doesn't know him. Soon after she finishes, the protagonist takes her things, except the comic, and runs back to her house. Soo-ho is thoughtful. The last time he saw the girl was the day she tried to take her own life, and now at the comic book store, she was acting like she didn't remember him or what happened. The next day, Ju-kyung gets a ride with his sister to go to school, then Hee-kyung goes for a coffee and becomes interested in a teacher encouraging a little child to go to class. When the protagonist is buying more makeup products, her old colleagues pass by her and don't recognize her, but it was a trigger for the girl who runs out of the store. A biker who was running away from other boys on motorcycles almost ran over the girl. Being on the run, she ends up leaving the helmet with Ju-kyung and running away. However, he ends up cornered. The protagonist helps him by activating the siren at the scene as if the police were arriving, so the boys run to escape, leaving him behind. Ju-kyung, after helping him, ends up running to her house too, and without paying attention, ends up carrying the boy's helmet with her. We now see Soo-ho dealing with his relationship with his father. It turns out that the man was with another woman when the boy was little and his mother was fighting for her own life. This was one of the reasons why Soo-ho found the man's character dubious, and now dealing with him has become a complicated task. His father appears when the boy is training in martial arts and challenges him to a fight. Soo-ho ends up winning, and then the man asks if his son doesn't want to move back in with him, but the boy says he doesn't want to interfere with his love life, and asks him not to show up by surprise anymore. He wouldn't want people to find out who his father is. Returning to the protagonist, her brother asks her to go to the comic book store and return one to the owner. The girl arrives at the place completely disguised for fear of running into Soo-ho. However, she relaxes after the owner says that the boy doesn't appear on weekends. However, Soo-ho goes to the store that day, and when Ju-kyung tries to hide it, he tells her that he knows the girl knows him. When Soo-ho adds that he recognized her the moment he saw her, the protagonist thinks he's talking about school, not the day on the roof, but since she wasn't wearing her glasses, she can't even imagine where she's from and starts to get confused. Afraid that your secret will be revealed, Ju-kyung makes a request to the boy that he doesn't tell anyone about it. Even though the two aren't thinking about the same thing, he accepts. To formalize the agreement, the protagonist makes him sign, promising that she won't tell anyone. Soo-ho recognizes the oath from one of the comics, and soon the two discover that they like the same things. The boy has been after a signed comic book that she has had for a long time, and Ju-kyung bribes him with it, making Soo-ho sign the agreement, buy her drinks, and even eat ramen together. After all this, the protagonist says that she will deliver the book on Monday and gives him a collectible sticker for the boy, as he had said it was her birthday. When Soo-ho gets home, he puts the sticker on his bedside lamp. On Monday, the protagonist packs the bag that will deliver Soo-ho's things, his soiled uniform, and the promised book. On the bus going to school, Ju-kyung falls asleep on the way, and a man uses this as an advantage to photograph under the girl's skirt. When her friend notices, she starts screaming in the vehicle, and the man runs out. But Soo-jin doesn't let it go and runs after the boy until she manages to stop him and calls the local security to arrest him. When the girl gets back on the bus, the protagonist thanks her and says that she would like to have a boyfriend like her friend. At school, Ju-kyung discovers that the boy on the motorcycle whose helmet she ended up with studies at the same institution as her and that he also has a relationship with Suho. Her friends say that the two were best friends, but then something happened and they never got along again. It seems that Seo-jun was away for a few days due to being involved in his mother's health issues. The protagonist spends the entire period winking at Suho and handing him things he likes at meals, believing that he knows that she is the girl from the comic book store. At one point, Ju-kyung asks him to meet her on the roof. Suho doesn't understand the intimacy that this girl thinks she has with him and sends her the real one. At this point, the protagonist realizes that they weren't talking about the same thing when he signed the contract and asks him if he's ever seen her outside. From school, Suho says no. Regardless of the secret that the boy promised to keep, Ju-kyung runs to retrieve the bag she gave him with the book so that he doesn't find out who she is, and luckily for her reputation, she succeeds. At home, Hee-kyung asks her sister about a teacher who she says is cute and works at the girls' school. However, the protagonist doesn't remember anyone who is like that. Suho calls Ju-kyung and remembers that the girl has something to deliver to him. He gives her the address of a place and says he will wait for her there. However, the protagonist doesn't know if he called the ugly Ju-kyung from the comic book store or the pretty one from school. To avoid being discovered, she decides to go with the helmet that she still has, which belongs to Seo-jun. Upon arriving at the place wearing a helmet, she explains that it is for safety in case she falls, and Suho asks her, since she was too sick to try to postpone, how she pedaled to the designated place. In the end, the protagonist gives him the book, and as she already knows that the boy was looking for the ugly version of her, she decides to go to the bathroom and take off her helmet, then she returns to the table. Suho got her number from the comic book store owner, and Ju-kyung tries to start the conversation to find out what secret he was referring to, but she can't find out anything. The next day, the protagonist gives Suho her clean uniform, and in physical education class, Seo-jun asks her to return his helmet. Later, her friend is upset that her boyfriend, perhaps he forgot that it is their 100-day anniversary together. However, upon entering the classroom, the girl receives a surprise that several members of the class helped prepare and even a serenade of love, with a little dance and everything. When they are going to kiss, one of the boy's friends decides to throw the cake at the couple. However, they manage to escape, and the one who ends up dirty in this story is Ju-kyung. The girls in the class try to help her and suggest that she go wash her face in the bathroom. However, the protagonist doesn't want her makeup to come off, so Ju-kyung runs to the bathroom to sort it out herself. She just didn't expect it to be full. The girl ends up trapped with all her classmates around trying to help her. She thinks that now that it's over, everyone will discover that she's ugly. However, when Suho appears, the boy wraps his uniform around the protagonist's head and takes her to the other bathroom that is empty for her to clean and tidy herself. While waiting for Ju-kyung to get ready, Seo-jun appears to torment Suho's life. The two boys exchange barbs, and Suho asks him to leave him alone and mind his own business. When the protagonist is ready and goes to thank Suho for helping her, she comes across Seo-jun, who reminds her that he wants his helmet back. Upon returning to the classroom, things continue as normal, and Ju-kyung begins to wonder if Suho helped her by knowing how she looks without makeup. The girl begins to create theories and consults her brother to see if it makes sense. The youngest agrees that it could be that and adds that Suho could use that against her. When she gets home, the protagonist's cell phone starts ringing, and it's Suho. The boy asks her to meet him at the comic book store. Ju-kyung at the scene tries to invent a story to convince him that she is not the same person from her school. She says that she is going to live in Canada, which is why she no longer studies for now. However, the boy knows who she really is, and let you know. Even after saying that the girl's number is the same as the one she studies at her school, the protagonist continues to say that it's not her but her cousin. Then Suho approaches and lets down her hair, then takes off her glasses and says she's sure that Jubal, as she had presented herself without makeup, is actually Jukyung. Everything is confirmed when the protagonist's mother appears at the store's door and starts shouting her name, calling her to go home. Jukyung runs off, leaving her bracelet behind and Suho guarding it. The boy knew from that day of the bag with the book inside at school who the protagonist was. He just hadn't told her yet, and he didn't get her number from the owner of the comic book store, but rather from a classmate. Suho confirmed that they were the same person the day she went to meet him wearing a helmet and then took it off. As he had called Jukyung and showed up to Jubal, it was easy. The next day, the protagonist tries to maintain control of the situation and meets Suho before class. She asks, actually begs, that the boy not say anything about her appearance, and in return, she will do whatever he wants. Suho ends up accepting and abusing the girl a little, asking for different things inside and outside of school. Meanwhile, Hee-kyung, the protagonist's sister, is in front of the school watching the movement, hoping to see that teacher she was interested in again. Things turn out better than she thought, and she ends up helping the man with his car, then giving her number and saying she can thank her by buying her dinner. Returning to school, Soo-jin comes across Seo-jun charging the protagonist with the helmet, and because she doesn't know the context, she goes to him later and asks him to leave the girl alone. Then, something strange happens to Soo-jin. She receives a message from her father asking her to go home early because they are going to eat with someone else, and the girl becomes restless. She manages to calm down when she talks to her friend, but not about the subject. Jukyung searches at home for the helmet that she should take to school the next day, but runs into a problem. Her brother decides to sell the object on an app. The two end up fighting, and in the end, their mother makes the brothers apologize and cut one of the other's toenails, saying they love each other. After several requests from Suho, Jukyung is surprised in the middle of one. So that the two can be even, he tells her to perform in the school talent show, as this is what the protagonist wants most, and ends up accepting. However, Jukyung ends up drinking a lot of water while in line to introduce herself and ends up letting everyone pass so she can go to the bathroom. When she returns, she goes straight to the stage without realizing that the auditions are over and her performance begins. In the end, it was a meeting with the school board. Several teachers and the principal were present, and the girl left the place very embarrassed. At night, Suho makes one more request to the protagonist. He wants her to pick up a comic from the store and take it to the playground. When the girl leaves the establishment, it starts to rain heavily. She starts running to get there faster and accidentally bumps into a man who was drinking. This boy starts insulting Jukyung about his appearance. No matter how much the girl apologizes, he doesn't stop. As soon as she arrives in Suho, the protagonist lets her feelings out and says that it's not her fault she was born ugly, and she doesn't understand why people don't like her for that. The boy notices that her knee is scraped, so he gives her a coat so that Jukyung, who is all wet, can warm up and look for a bandage. While Suho is bandaging the protagonist's wound, Seo-jun watches them from afar. The next day at school, Seo-jun tells Suho that he must be happy even after taking his friend's life and throws the boy's food tray on the floor. Then he goes towards Jukyung and sits next to her, saying that he is going to have his meal with the girl. Which awakens anger in Suho, who takes him out of the chair, and the two start to fight. But Suho didn't have the courage to hit Seo-jun, unlike him, who left his face bruised. The director makes them both stop and takes them to his room. We see a bit of Seo-jun's past. The two had a friend named Se-yun who was going through some media exposure, and the spotlight was following him. In the last conversation Seo-jun had with this boy, he said that if he told Suho, he would believe him and everything would be fine. However, in the next scene, we see Seo-jun at his desperate friend's funeral. Returning to the protagonist, everyone starts to think that the fight happened because they both liked the girl, and the three became the topic of the moment. Seo-jun and Suho talk on the court later. Seo-jun tells the boy never to mention their friend's name again, as he is sure that Suho will believe what he says. To cool his head, Suho goes to the comic book store and remembers when he was little and was crying one day, and Ju-kyung made fun of him until he laughed. The next day, Ju-kyung and her friends are setting up a study group, and Soo-jin invites Suho to join them, but the boy denies it. Suho arranged a blind date for the protagonist, and the girl is excited. The two arranged to meet at the cinema and continued exchanging messages. As Suho was next to Ju-kyung on the bus, he kept paying attention to their conversation. Via the protagonist's cell phone. Meanwhile, Seo-jun's mother has been released from the hospital, and she goes straight to Ju-kyung's mother's salon. The two have been friends for a long time. This visit just wasn't very good for the protagonist, who was there without makeup, and so Seo-jun couldn't see her clean face, so she put a clay mask on her face. The boy thinks it's hilarious and takes photos of Ju-kyung. When their mothers are talking, Seo-jun's mother comments that he loves riding his motorcycle, despite having stopped recently at her request, so the protagonist reveals that the boy continues to ride, and very quickly. With that, the woman asks her to keep an eye on her son and let her know every time she sees him on a motorcycle. The next day, while Ju-kyung is on his date, Suho is starting to take his Math Olympiads test. However, when the lovebirds enter the cinema, the boy is hidden in the movie theater and watches them. It turns out he dropped his at the beginning and went straight to the scene. At one point, Suho sees the boy hugging the girl and going to give her a kiss. His reaction was the most unexpected of all. He jumps across the benches and separates the lovebirds. However, it turns out that it wasn't Ju-kyung and the guy of your date, but other people. At the end of the meeting, the boy says that he would like to take the protagonist home, but he couldn't, as he has a meeting with his class. However, it was a lie, and the man finds another girl as soon as Ju-kyung leaves. Suho, who saw everything and intimidated him in the bathroom, tells the boy to send messages to Ju-kyung dismissing her and that if he thinks about deceiving her again, it will have consequences. At home, the protagonist discovered through her mother that Seo-jun worked to pay his school fees and even part of the hospital bills. The woman is afraid that he will continue riding his motorcycle, as she lost her husband, the father of Seo-jun, in a traffic accident. Later, Hee-kyung receives a message from that teacher, and the man says that taking her out to eat would take up too much of the woman's time, so he will send her an amount to her account so Hee-kyung can choose something. The next day at school, Ju-kyung catches Seo-jun showing something to his friends and thinks it's that photo of her with a mask on her face, so he takes his motorcycle key from the boy's pocket and runs away. Seo-jun goes after her, and when he catches up with her, Suho arrives to see what is happening. To avoid another fight between the two, the protagonist returns the key and tells them to go their separate ways. Later, Ju-kyung meets his friends after school to join the study group. When they arrive at the place, they find Suho waiting for them, and the boy decides to participate. Afterwards, the group goes to karaoke and has fun. Seo-jun is also there, but in another room. We find out in the next scene that Hee-kyung works at Suho's father's company, and the one-year anniversary of the boy's friend Se-yeon's death is approaching. As he was an artist, the company is thinking about a way to honor him. Returning to the protagonist, she ends up meeting Seo-jun outside the establishment, and the two come across that group of boys who chased Seo-jun the first time they met. Without knowing what to do, the girl starts running and pulls Seo-jun with her. Upon seeing the scene of the two being chased, Suho starts running after them to help them. However, Ju-kyung and the boy manage to lose the boys, and in the end, it ends up being left to Suho. He manages to defend himself at first, but then the boys hold him back so the leader can teach him a lesson until the police arrive. Meanwhile, Seo-jun ends up giving the protagonist a ride on his motorcycle, as the guys stole her purse with her wallet and cell phone inside because they couldn't find her. Suho was waiting for her in front of the comic book store, and when he sees the two approaching, he questions why Seo-jun gave Ju-kyung a ride. However, the conversation is interrupted when Hee-kyung approaches, staggering because he has had a few drinks. The boys help the girl take her sister home, and in the end, Hee-kyung spills everything on Suho's jacket, who is paralyzed by the situation. The next day at school, when Seo-jun notices that Suho is approaching the protagonist, he approaches her first and hands her the key to his motorcycle, then says that he will listen to her from that moment on. The girl didn't quite understand what he meant, and when she goes after the boy, Suho asks her not to go and says he has something to tell her. However, in the end, the boy says nothing about anything. In the classroom, Ju-kyung asks Seo-jun why he gave him the key to his motorcycle, and the boy says it's so he won't be in danger of riding it and is following what he had told him previously, that he would only listen to the protagonist from that moment on. The boy hands Ju-kyung a juice, and despite the nice gesture, the girl informs him that she likes the strawberry flavor. In the laboratory, Suho does something new and invites the protagonist to sit next to her, then gives her strawberry juice. When they are in the cafeteria, Seo-jun sits next to Ju-kyung, and the girl asks him to leave. Obviously, the annoyingly cute guy doesn't move, and the two even end up being photographed at the moment he holds the protagonist's hair. Then, to get it over with, the girl gives Seo-jun the key to her motorcycle. However, he says he doesn't need to do that, as he parked it in front of the protagonist's house. Surprised by the news, the girl ends up accidentally spitting the rest of the food that was in her mouth onto his face. Meanwhile, we see Go-woon singing in the school choir. The teacher informs everyone in front of everyone that the girl will be the one to perform the solo in the performance, and she is super happy. However, not for long, as she is intimidated by other girls to give up while she rehearses alone and the protagonist watches everything from afar. Returning home after class, on the bus, Ju-kyung notices that Soo-jin's hands are chapped and applies moisturizer to her friend's skin to help. Suddenly the bullies from her old school enter the bus, and the protagonist's heart stops. Soo-jin notices that the girl has become nervous and decides that they should get off the vehicle. Her friend confronts Saemi, telling her to get out of her way, and the two sit at the stop. Soo-jin says she has no reason for Ju-kyung to be like this. If she acts more confident, things will be different next time. At night, Suho thinks about sending a message to the protagonist to discuss something with her but ends up giving up. However, when she puts her cell phone in her pocket, she ends up calling the girl by accident, and the person who answers is Ju-kyung's brother. The protagonist was taking a shower, and when she leaves, the two start to have those normal sibling arguments. When the girl realizes that Suho is listening to everything, she gets embarrassed and hangs up the call, but when she enters her room, she returns to him. The boy invites her to the playground and asks her to take his coat that Hee-kyung had soiled by vomiting on it that day. At the playground, Ju-kyung arrives a little late and finds Suho trying to get the attention of a kitten, but the little animal only goes with the protagonist. The girl says that she started feeding him because she felt sorry for the kitten being alone and having no family. That's how she won him over, and Suho says that she doesn't have a family either and reveals that he lives alone when Ju-kyung asks about it. The protagonist didn't take the boy's clothes because they hadn't dried yet and apologizes for that. Ju-kyung starts to say goodbye when Suho finds a basketball, and the two start practicing shooting. Afterwards, Suho takes the protagonist home and says that if she gives him the key to Seo-jun's motorcycle, the boy will return it to the owner. The next day, the motorcycle is no longer in front of his house, and Ju-kyung believes that Suho has really resolved the issue. In physical education class, the protagonist's classmates talk about a basketball match she is going to have, and on one side we have Suho's team, on the other Seo-jun's team. The court is going to catch fire. Later, Seo-jun receives a call informing him that his motorcycle was towed. The boy doesn't believe that Ju-kyung could have done it. However, Suho approaches and says that he was the one who committed the act of reporting it. Meanwhile, in the school bathroom, Go-woon is intimidated by those choir girls and ends up being surprised when the protagonist enters the room and throws a bucket of water at the girls. Ju-kyung says that she is the girl's sister and that it is for them to leave them alone. Soo-ah and Soo-jin enter the bathroom and defend their friend. Soo-jin makes a capoeira move that almost hits them in the face to keep the girls quiet. On the roof, the protagonist consoles Go-woon and says that she shouldn't give up on performing because of the things those girls said, because her talent is unique and beautiful. Ju-kyung knows how she feels more than anyone and is happy to have helped the girl. If someone had done that for her too, maybe things would have been different. At the bus stop, when Suho asks her what she is doing, the protagonist says that she is watching a makeup tutorial to help a person who reminds her of her past. The girl adds that she also looks ugly without makeup. And Suho comments that the girl is pretty without makeup. Then Ju-kyung's bus arrives, and she gets on. The protagonist thinks that it can't be possible that he likes her, but decides to test something and ask him out. To see a film after the school festival, which, to his surprise, he accepts. When getting off the bus, Suho receives a call from Seo-jun asking where he is. Then we see the two talking, and Suho gives him the key to the boy's motorcycle. He then confesses to liking Ju-kyung and asks that he doesn't use the girl to get revenge on him. Seo-jun thinks that because Suho didn't answer Se-yeon's call the night he took his own life, the boy can't be happy and asks him what the protagonist would think of him if she knew he ended up helping his own friend take his life. Hee-kyung is waiting for that teacher to leave school, and as she doesn't want his money but time with the man, she invites him out for dinner that same night. The conversation between the two flows perfectly, and at one point, when Hee-kyung goes to clean the teacher's mouth, he ends up saying that he requires a lot of care, which causes the man who has his mouth full to accidentally spit in the woman's face, as I didn't expect her words. Since she is really dirty and has already had enough shame, the woman says that she likes to be very direct and reveals to the teacher that she is in love with him, another surprise that he didn't imagine. The next day is the school festival, and Ju-kyung finds herself in déjà vu. Go-woon appears with makeup on, however, looking like a clown, like the protagonist the first time she tried. Ju-kyung takes the girl to a place where it's just the two of them before anyone else sees her and helps her fix her face. During the performance, everything goes perfectly well, and the girl shines on stage. After the stage, Go-woon is thanking the protagonist for all her help, and Ju-kyung finds out that Seo-jun is the little girl's brother. The boy is also surprised that the two know each other, and when they are alone, his sister explains that the protagonist helped him deal with some intimidating girls and put on makeup. Meanwhile, Ju-kyung wears a piggy costume to liven up the basketball game together with Soo-ah, since Soo-jin doesn't know if she will attend. When she is leaving the locker room, the protagonist comes across Suho, and as he didn't respond to her messages, she tries to start something with the boy. However, Suho is arrogant and says he won't go to the movies with her anymore, adding that he's only kind because he feels sorry for Ju-kyung. The protagonist didn't expect this and gets extremely upset, so she tells the boy that she never asked him to do anything for her and that from that moment on she can ignore him. After Ju-kyung leaves the locker room, he starts crying, and during the entire game it was like that too. Lucky that with the pig's head, no one could see. Soo-jin ends up showing up to watch the basketball game with her friends, and Suho's team wins. The boy still on the court goes to Seo-jun and says that he's right, the issue with their friend is all his fault, but he still shouldn't mess with Ju-kyung because of him, because he won't let him. At night, there is a show for the students, and the singer plays a song by Se-yeon, which touches Suho's heart, and the boy starts crying a lot. Ju-kyung tries to help him when he finds him, but he leaves running and asks her not to follow him. We see what happened that night. Se-yeon called Suho when all that madness with the press started. However, the boy didn't answer and decided to go take a shower. When he left, he heard the news and ran to the place. They had a friendship bracelet, and on the stretcher that had a body covered, there was the hand out with the bloody bracelet. At that moment, the boy began to blame himself for not having attended to his friend, and his world has become darker since then. At home, when picking up Suho's coat, which her sister had soiled and is now clean, the protagonist realizes that it was the boy who saved her that day when she wanted to throw herself off the roof of the building. Then everything falls into place. the reason why he was in a bad way and also why he cursed her, saying that her loved ones would blame themselves after she was gone forever if she did that. Ju-kyung goes to the same roof and finds Suho crying there despite the disagreements from earlier. She consoles him. Later, when the boy is calmer, the two talk about the first night they met on the roof and are interrupted when the residents enter the place shouting, warning that the building is on fire. However, when everyone is going downstairs, the two discover that it was smoke that activated the fire alarm, but there is no fire itself. The next day, report cards are delivered to the protagonist's school, and she is worried because her grades were lower than the girl expected. When her mother finds out at the meeting how much her daughter scored in each subject, she becomes angry. However, she ends up making a new client when the wind from her little portable fan lifts the professor's face, and she notices that he doesn't have eyebrows, so the woman gives him her salon card in case one day she wants to get them pigmented. Suho's father is also at school, and this has eased things for now between Ju-kyung and his mother, as the woman is a big fan of the man and has been distracted by him for a long time. When the news that Suho's father is a celebrity spreads and the boy leaves everyone to isolate himself, Soo-jin explains that he doesn't like others knowing who his father is. Later in the parking lot, Ju-kyung's mother is inconvenienced once again with Suho's father while he is talking to his son and bothers him by asking for a photo. Meanwhile, Seo-jun is in the bathroom washing his face, remembering when he met Suho's father at Se-yeon's funeral. The man seems to have fired the boy after the controversy that took place in the press, which may have led to other reasons why he took his life. We see in the next scene why Soo-jin is a little anxious and has the habit of washing her hands every time she is attacked. Her father, after discovering her grades, says if in passing she came second among the better grades, he slaps her in the face and says she won't get into the best medical school like that. The next day, Go-woon invites the protagonist to have a drink after school, where she thanks Ju-kyung for helping her, and despite the other girls continuing to talk about her face, the protagonist asks if she doesn't feel bad about it. However, Go-woon teaches her something indirectly. She says that if she agreed with the bad things these girls say, she would be telling herself that she is a loser. So she decided to just ignore them and live with her face the way it is. But anyway, Go-woon asks Ju-kyung to teach her how to use makeup, and the two go to the girl's house. In the place, the protagonist did not expect what was to come. While she was in the room putting makeup on the little girl, Seo-jun appeared wearing headphones, boxer shorts, and a bathrobe, dancing without realizing that there were people in the place. However, as soon as she turned around and saw Ju-kyung, he ran to her room in shame. Upon arriving home, the protagonist is faced with another surprise. Suho is there to have dinner with her family. It turns out that the girl's mother went to the comic book store to look for her daughter and ended up finding the boy, taking this into account. Considering that he is the son of his idol, he decided to invite him to eat something. When Suho goes to help Ju-kyung's brother set the table for dinner, the boy asks if Suho likes his sister, and he confesses that he does. However, the boy doesn't believe it and laughs at the situation. He just asks that Suho not make jokes like that with the protagonist so that she doesn't confuse things. At the dinner table, things go as reasonably as possible. We know that the protagonist's family has a habit of being a little noisy and talking about each person's faults, even in front of visitors. However, when Hee-kyung arrives home, she is drunk again and ends up tripping over a cable that turns off all the lighting in the house. Everyone helps look for the circuit breaker, and the first to find her cell phone to turn on the flashlight and help is Ju-kyung. However, when she points the light to where the rest are, she ends up seeing the scene of Suho lying on the floor with everyone on top of him. The next day, Hee-kyung invites her sister to go to the sauna with her and eat something delicious afterwards. However, when she is inside the furnace, Seo-jun enters together with a classmate from school. She takes the opportunity when they leave because they can't stand the heat and goes to the cafeteria to find her sister, who, when she finds her, almost says her name, so the girl puts a piece of chicken in her mouth to stop her. Afterwards, Jukyung stops by an establishment to get hamburgers for the two of them to eat and ends up finding the bullies from her old school there, and as expected, they repeat the same mistakes with the girl. The protagonist runs away when she has the opportunity but ends up leaving her wallet, saying where she studied, behind, and when she goes back to get it, she comes across Suho asking them to return the object. The boy ran up to her to give her his belongings, and Jukyung says that she doesn't understand why he did that if he isn't even her friend. Suho asks her if those girls were the ones who bullied her at her old school, and she confirms. Meanwhile, the protagonist's teacher is getting her eyebrows done at her mother's salon, and as soon as Hee-kyung enters, the man runs out without even having them ready because he feels ashamed of being seen like that. The woman follows him, and in the end, the two end up having their first kiss. The next day, Seo-jun, when accessing social media, discovers that Jukyung was also in the sauna like him, but he doesn't remember seeing her. Meanwhile, that group of boys who are always chasing Seo-jun found the photo that was taken in the cafeteria of the boy and the protagonist together, and that was enough for them to use it to get his attention. Seo-jun is in the hospital with his mother, and her exams are good. The medication will be reduced, and the doctor says that this is thanks to an acquaintance of the boy who requested the best team in the place to take care of her. Seo-jun goes to Suho to find out why he did this, and the boy says that it's what he would do for his mother if she were in her place too, adding that because the two were friends in the past, that mattered. The conversation is interrupted when Seo-jun receives a call from Jukyung's cell phone, but when she answers it, she discovers that it is about those boys telling her that they are with her at a place and want him there. When the protagonist has the opportunity and the rest are distracted, she takes out her cell phone and makes a video call to Suwa, showing her the environment. The three of them know where it is and run to help her. The first to arrive are Suho and Seo-jun, who, upon finding the room where she is, start fighting with the boys. Then the fantastic trio also arrive, and Soo-jin is perfect, as she always uses her blows to help put an end to the bullies. In the next scene, we see a baseball player who is the best on his team. His name is Hyung-jin. The man is focused on the game and hitting pitches when he gets a strike in his heart when he sees a beautiful girl in the stands. The next day at school, the teacher is wondering why Hee-kyung didn't call him after their kiss. Meanwhile, some kids who are always kept in trouble are in the principal's office being reprimanded because the karaoke owner called the school to report the fight he had on the premises with some of their students. Then the real participants in the fight arrive, and in the middle of the confusion, a delivery man appears to deliver the flowers to the teacher, sent by Hee-kyung. The man gets nervous and sends all the students to the detention room. The professor calls his admirer, and the woman tells him the meaning of the flowers, which is, "I will do my best for you." The woman confesses that this is what she intends to do for her beloved. Hee-kyung asks him to think about her every time he looks at the flowers and tells him that she is going on a trip, so she will be away for a while. In the bathroom, Seo-jun talks to Suho and says that he should be grateful for what his former friend did to help his mother, but asks that from that moment on, he stay out of his affairs. Suho approaches the boy and puts his head on his shoulder. When Seo-jun questions what he's doing, Suho just says that she ended up falling asleep while he was talking. When he leaves the bathroom, Seo-jun can't stop thinking about the protagonist. He is really falling in love with her. At the bus stop, upon seeing Suho, Jukyung remembers when they were coming back after the fight in the taxi, and she was scared thinking about the things that happened when she was alone with those boys, and Suho took her hand to calm down. Returning to the present day, the protagonist asks if he wants to go to the comic book store with her later. However, the boy denies it, and when he is in the car, he tells her to meet him at the cafe the next day to study together, since he paid attention when the girl and her family were saying she needed to improve her grades. In the cafeteria, while they are studying, Suwa invites the protagonist to go to another baseball game with her, and Jukyung accepts. It turns out that her friend is in love with a player on the team called Hyung-jin, the same one we saw previously. However, he asks her not to talk to her boyfriend. After studying, that boy who had picked up the protagonist to ask Seo-jun at karaoke appears, and he goes to apologize to the girl. However, before he could complete the sentence, Ju-kyung takes a spray and throws it in his eyes to protect himself. Protect, thinking he would do something else. As soon as the boy comes out near them, he finds Soo-ho and makes sure he sees him. It turns out that he kept pressuring the boy to do this. It was at his school, at the internet cafe, and even at the butcher's. Soo-jin and Ju-kyung decide to drink a little later and eat something together. The protagonist notices that her friend's hands are much drier, and she says it's because of her habit of washing a lot when she's stressed. Soo-jin confesses that it's related to her grades, but asks Ju-kyung not to tell anyone, as she's the only one who knows. The next day, the protagonist is confident that she will do well in the test, as she worked hard and studied hard for it. At the baseball game, the girls are surprised when Soo-ho and Taehoon show up. Soo-ah's boyfriend is upset that she lied about being at her grandmother's birthday, but it soon passes. However, the two find it strange that Soo-ho is with him, as she has always dodged the boy's invitations, and he says that the two are now good friends. After the game, Hyung-jin goes to where the girls are and tells Ju-kyung that he has been looking for her since the last time he saw her. He fell in love with her, who was in the stands. The boy asks for the protagonist's number, and when Soo-ho realizes that she added him to her contacts, he lectures her, saying that Hyung-jin could be a bad person and that she should be more careful. Soo-ho leaves for a place to de-stress, and Taehoon follows him. The boy says he knows he likes Ju-kyung and gives him some tips on how to tell the girl. Meanwhile, the protagonist ends up having a hasty meeting with the player, thanks to Soo-ah. The next day, the professor remembers the dinner he had with Hee-kyung, and the man told her that he didn't want to date at the moment. He makes an analogy to shoes, saying that he only buys a shoe after analyzing it from all angles. However, as he doesn't want a new one now, he ends up not even going into shoe stores. The protagonist's brother found Go-woon beautiful at the performance, and upon hearing her sing again, he entered the room to pay her a compliment, which came out more like an insult, and the girl left the room. Ju-kyung's grades weren't as good as she expected, and the girl knows that as soon as her mom finds out, she's going to be screwed. Soo-jin ended up falling from his position and moving to 4th place. Hyung-jin surprises the protagonist and appears at her school. The boy gives her his lucky baseball and says that this way she will need to appear in the next game so that when Hyung-jin wins, he can ask her out. Seo-jun approaches the two and says that she thought the girl was dating him until then and that taking someone else in front of him is showing that she has no respect for her ex. Hyun-jin runs out after a teacher arrives, and Ju-kyung goes after him. On the way, she stops and listens to Soo-ho's conversation with a girl who declared herself to him. However, the boy says he likes someone else at the moment. When she gets home, the protagonist discovers that her mother was so angry about her grades that she threw all of the girls' makeup in the trash. Ju-kyung then goes to her mother and starts crying, saying that she really tried hard to improve her grades and that the woman never paid attention to her, which is why she never told her about what happened at her last school and ran outside to retrieve her belongings. Soo-ho is in front of the protagonist's house, as he was ready to confess his feelings for her, but when he sees her crying, he decides it's not the best time. The two go to the comic book store, and there the girl vents. Soo-ho then puts his hand on her head and says that she was incredible, that he knows how much she studied, and that Ju-kyung's ranking went up by 20. He finds himself proud. Meanwhile, the protagonist's mother wonders at home about what happened to her daughter at her old school, and when her husband suggests that it was because she was a little ugly, the woman doesn't believe that could be the case. The boy takes Ju-kyung home, and there he approaches her very close and gives her a hair clip as a gift, then he says goodbye. We see in the next scene Soo-jin with a bruised face. Her father did this after finding out that she dropped out of the top 10 students. Soo-ho is waiting to give the class schedule when Soo-jin ends up entering the place, and upon seeing him, she runs out. The boy follows her and asks if it was her father who did this to her again, and Soo-jin starts to vent. In the end, her friend hugs her to console her, and when Ju-kyung sees the two of them, she starts to believe that he likes her friend. In the living room, Soo-jin apologizes to her friend for some things she said, and he says that if you need anything, just call him. The girl then says that Soo-ho should only think of her as a friend. However, the boy confirms that she thinks of her as a friend, nothing more. When Ju-kyung enters the classroom and sees Soo-jin with the cap, he decides to sit in the back seats instead of the one Soo-ho had set aside for her. Meanwhile, Hee-kyung, upon arriving from a business trip, goes straight to the professor's house and calls him to let him know that he is outside, so the lovebirds go upstairs to have some fun. Seo-jun asks the protagonist for help buying a birthday present for her sister. At the scene, she receives a call from Soo-ho asking where she is, and when she hears Seo-jun's voice in the background, it makes her heart melt. Soo-ho ends up appearing at the scene, and when he finds Ju-kyung, he starts to pull her out of the elevator. However, it turns out that Seo-jun holds her, so the girl is almost crushed by the elevator. In the end, Soo-ho enters, and they press the buttons so much that the elevator breaks down with the three of them inside. Before the event, the protagonist had a huge drink and started to feel like going to the bathroom, as the doors were locked. Soo-ho suggested she do it in the cup. But with luck, the doors are soon opened, and she manages to run to the bathroom. Then, when she goes out into the street, it is snowing, and the player appears to be covering her with his umbrella. Ju-kyung thinks the time has come to be honest with the boy and tells him that she likes someone else, so she will return his lucky ball and not go to the game. On the day of the game, Soo-ho and Seo-jun show up to watch, and when they hear that if Hyung-jin wins the game, he will be taken to play in the USA, the boys start cheering for the player and celebrate by hugging each other every time. Point he makes. Once it's over, Soo-ho checks whether Seo-jun just came to see the game and discovers that her old friend is also liking the protagonist. After this discovery, Soo-ho decides that she must confess her love to the protagonist soon, and to do so, she buys a necklace as a gift to give right away. Ju-kyung will go on a trip with her class and Hee-kyung, who takes her with the hope of seeing her beloved. And successfully, the woman spots Junwoo. The two go to hug. However, as no one knows about their relationship and Ju-kyung goes back to get his cell phone that he forgot in the car, they are forced to disguise themselves. We now see a little more about the professor's life. He tells his crush that he is in a lot of debt at the moment, having taken out a student loan, which is why he didn't want to date anyone at the moment. But our beautiful Hee-kyung doesn't care about that and even gave a gift to her lover. He needed new shoes, and that's what she bought for him on the trip. The woman says she will be good to the teacher and asks him to stay with her. Returning to the protagonist, Soo-ho invites her to sit next to her on the bus. However, Soo-jin gets in front of her and sits down. So Seo-jun gets the opportunity to sit next to the girl, and of course he takes advantage. In the tent, the girls comment on what Soo-ho had said to that girl, that he liked someone else. Soo-ah talks about the possibility of being Soo-jin, and the girl neither denies nor affirms. Ju-kyung's colleagues pick on her because she and Seo-jun are wearing matching t-shirts, and everyone comments that they could be a possible couple. And of course, Seo-jun joins the crowd. Whoever manages the place gives information to the kids who want to explore the forest. The man tells a legend that a very ugly woman has lived near the well for years. Over time, she ended up without a face, and that's why she walks around at night looking for beautiful people to steal your face. Meanwhile, Hee-kyung works on Se-yeon's memorial project. In the previous days, she met with Seo-jun because she believes he is the Leo who helped compose the songs. However, the boy is unhappy with the company after what they did to your friend and doesn't want to participate in anything she's involved in. Later, the woman ends up meeting her boss before going home and comments about thinking it would be a good idea to use Seo-jun in the boy's honor, and that's why she will continue trying to contact him. However, when the man is only with his assistant, she asks him to find a way so that the tribute doesn't happen. Returning to the protagonist, Soo-ho takes her to ride a boat on the lake, and to create a more relaxing atmosphere, he plays a song by Se-yeon that has never been released. Later, when Ju-kyung goes to take a photo of the two of them, Suho doesn't feel comfortable with the camera and explains that it's because he's had to deal with his father's paparazzi since he was very young. But how does he know that the girl likes a little selfie? He was willing to take one with her. However, when they are taking the photo, an insect flies into the protagonist's face, and in her desperation to get it out, she ends up falling out of the boat and ending up in the lake. Afterwards, Suho and Ju-kyung get soaked, and so that Soo-jin doesn't see her without makeup, the boy distracts her, so the protagonist remains hidden inside the forest and ends up scaring her colleagues because they think it was that woman's spirit from the pit that stole faces. The next day at work, Hee-kyung discovered that she was the only one on her team who was transferred to another department, and her colleague asks if she didn't do something to irritate her boss to make this happen. However, the woman asserts herself and says that they can't do it. This without prior notice. Meanwhile, the protagonist does not participate in the treasure hunt because she is not feeling well and ends up on the bus to rest. Seo-jun watches the moment she leaves and goes after her to see if the girl is okay. He notices that Ju-kyung has a fever and ends up giving her medicine and staying with her while she sleeps. He even gives her an improvised bracelet. Suho realizes that the two are alone on the bus and goes after him to find out what happened. In the end, the two end up fighting as always. In the protagonist's mother's salon, a client is angry, and when she goes to throw a glass of water at the woman, her husband arrives and protects her, then asks the client to leave. And when the woman arrives home at night, she receives a candlelit dinner prepared by her husband. The two enjoy a beautiful night. In order not to disturb his parents, Ju-young goes to the comic book store, and there he ends up meeting Go-woon. The boy makes a comment trying to be funny about her following him, but Go-woon doesn't think it's funny at all. Returning to the protagonist, there is a show at the school camp, and Seo-jun is called to sing because he is a student who received K-pop training. However, the boy only agrees to go on stage when Ju-kyung promises him to make a wish come true. In the middle of the song, the protagonist comes out to see Soo-jin all happy next to Suho wearing the boy's cap, and Taehoon later catches up with her and says that Suho is waiting for the girl to take his coat. Then the boy goes to Suho and says that it is the right time for him to declare himself and that Ju-kyung is waiting for him. However, when she arrives at the place, it's Soo-jin, and Suho doesn't understand. It turns out that on the way the protagonist met her friend and she offered to give her the coat, as the girl thought that Suho liked Soo-jin just handed it over. Seo-jun ends up finding Ju-kyung to ask her about her desire, and she is crying. The boy tries to calm her down even after knowing that the reason is that Suho doesn't like her like she likes him. Suho runs out to find the protagonist and catches her with Seo-jun wiping her tears, and then the girl runs away. Her makeup ended up coming off while she was crying, and before she could put the products on her face again, her colleagues reappear, and to hide her ugliness, Suho helps her. The two are hiding behind a rock when the boy decides to confess to her, and the couple's first kiss takes place. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share to help me. Until next time.